Chris Metherell is leading our experience in the Wildflower Society of online field meetings. Thank you ever so much, Chris, for agreeing to blaze this trail for us. Chris is a Wildflower Society member. He's a recent president of the BSBI, the Botanical Society of the British Isles. He's an author, together with Fred Rumsey, recently of a book on euphrasia, or eyebrights. And yeah, there we are, Chris. And he is, and you may want to avail yourself of his expertise in this one, he is a clog dance teacher. So, you know, if that's what you'd like and you ask me, I'll forward his email so you can contact him for clog dance training. Okay, over to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to see so many faces I recognise, and actually got quite a lot of faces I don't recognise, and that's even better, I suppose, really. I mean, it's amazing to have 90 people for a meeting. I mean, that's, well, I suppose something like 10% of membership have turned out for a field meeting. It must be the first time you've ever had 10% of the membership at a single field meeting.
I think it's more than that, Chris.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen. We're going to talk about plants on Holy Island. Let's see if I can do this. Here we are. And I'm hoping you've all got some maps. Is that right, Janet?
Yeah.
Yep, good. Okay, we're away. So, Holy Island, as you can see, is off the coast of Northumberland. I'm a Vice County Recorder for Northumberland. That's this bit of Northumberland, sort of about here. Comes up to the Cheviot and down to the coast of Amble, and I live just about where that arrow is. So it's not far from Holy Island, and it's one of, I mean, Northumberland's most fantastic Vice County to be a recorder. It's got mountains, it's got the Cheviot, well, mountain, it's a big hill, but it's quite big. We try walking up it. It's got bags of coastline, and one of the jewels in the crown is Holy Island. It's probably the most visited botanical site, in fact I'm sure it is, in Northumberland. And not only, of course, botanists, it's a bit of a problem. We actually hit our first year 3 years ago when we had 1 million visitors on Holy Island during the summer. And it's tiny, as you'll see. So it's off the coast of Northumberland. It's a part of the Lindisfarne National Nature Reserve. Not all the island is a National Nature Reserve. It's this end, which we call the snook. Snook is a Northumbrian word for a bit that sticks out, like my ears, you know, snooky ears. So the snook is part of the National Nature Reserve, as is the north of the island. You can see basically these rather unkempt bits of the Nature Reserve. There's a small village and farmland in the middle. The main interest is in, obviously, the National Nature Reserve is part here, but also down here, and I'll show you some photographs in a minute, there is, of course, the famous castle, and this is a windsill dike, dirty great big piece of the windsill, and that has its own particular flora, although it's not actually, it's triple SI, but it's not actually part of the National Nature Reserve. So what we're going to do is, in a virtual sense, we're going to cross the causeway. The causeway comes in from here, and you have to be careful crossing the causeway. This happens every year. Much amusement from the locals. It's always on the news, much clapping and cheering when it happens to somebody. Last year it happened to a taxi driver. Excellent, you know, marvellous. There's even more cheering when it happened to a taxi driver. I say, you really have to be careful crossing. It looks as though it's going to be all right, that you can make it through when there's a little bit of water, and then your engine starts going, and it will come over the roof of this car. This is, after the people have been rescued, you'll just see the roof eventually. It's very deep, so it's really not a good thing to do. And you come across the causeway, and we're going to concentrate all our efforts today on this part of the island, which I say is called the Snook. And I mentioned that there are other parts, and let's just look at those before we go back and do our trip. These parts down here, it's called the Hoof. It's whinstone grassland. It's got a very nice flora. You can see where those people are standing at the back. There are 2 or 3 very nice trifoliums that live on that slope down from where they're standing. You can see the island flora there. There are meadow saxifrages in the summer, the grass of Parnassus, Silene, all sorts of fairly standard things, but it's a nice aggregation of plants. And that is this part of the island here. If we move slightly to the east, the castle is built on the end of this whinstone crag, and you'll see that it says Lime Point Kilns. And in fact, all over the island, there are quite a few lime kilns. The coastal, well, all of Northumberland, of course, is built on carboniferous rocks, a mixture of carboniferous limestone and carboniferous gritstones. It's mostly grit. The limestones are quite thin as one goes north, but they're thick enough to be used for making lime. And all over Northumberland, lots of farms have lime kilns, and there are several on Holy Island. This is the best preserved one. I think it's been a bit restored. And lime was actually shipped out of here. At one time, you could get a ship up, quite a large ship up to this lime kiln. And there was a jetty on the other side, and the lime was exported. And so, of course, because there's lots of lime, there are lots of really interesting plants. And the island is well known for its lime-loving plants. But the main parts of the island, the biggest part of the reserve, as I said, is the Snook. But this part up in the north, why am I just moving? Here we are. It's called the Links, and it's part of the National Nature Reserve. It's a mixture of very broad dune slacks. The dune slacks are really very wide compared with the quite small slacks on the Snook, and marram grass along the edges. So that's another typical shot. This is the largest slack, very rich flora, and about there, about 6 years ago, we discovered Ophioglossum azoricum. And you can see it's not far from a footpath. This area has been visited by, I should think, hundreds of botanists over the years. Ophioglossum azoricum has obviously been there for quite a long time, very small plant, and it's just been missed. And we just tripped over it a few years ago, which was a really amazing find. All around the island, not so much on the north coast, mostly on the south coast and on the east, there are salt marshes, and of course they have their own classic flora, Armeria marittima, lots of, oh dear, it used to be Aster tripodium, and now it's tripodium something else, isn't it? I should have looked it up before I started. Somebody will know. Lots of salt marsh. There's the village. We're looking now back along the south side of the island from the Snook, back towards the main village, and all this area on the side of the road is salt marsh, gets flooded at high tide. In fact, you can see the high tide does come up to this lay-by. This is a very famous lay-by. This is the lay-by where all the botanists park, because there are a lot, just about here, there are lots and lots of orchids. At the north end of the island, still on the links, there is a quarry, limestone quarry, and which fed the kilns, particularly the large kiln I'll show you. There's a quarry pond, and it's once again it's got a very rich flora. Brookweed particularly, which is not common in Northumberland, it's very, very common in this area. There's a small pond which is not doing so well. It needs a bit of tender loving care, but there is a small quarry pond that used to have some potamogetons in it several years ago, not so many now. And so we're going to park up in the Snook car park, and if I show you on the map, we've come across the causeway down this very rutted track, and we're going to park up in the Snook car park. Here's the rutted track. It's been a very wet year, and as you park up, you will see in the distance there are a couple of houses. There's a Snook house. They're holiday homes now. One is rented out, and one is has a family that uses it as a holiday home. And next to the path, and you can't really see it easily on the aerial photograph, is a really nice wet slack. Now you can see from the photograph it looks fairly dry, but it's been getting wetter and wetter and wetter over the years, and here it is in the photograph. You can see this particular year it's been raining so much that it's actually quite a deep lake. It's about there, it's probably about almost a metre in the centre. And of course it's got lovely flora, because the beauty of the Snook is that it has these dune slacks that get very wet and then they dry out, although they're always wet underneath. If you kneel on them, you'll get a wet kneecap. And some years they're really wet and you get one set of plants, and then the next year there'll be hardly any rain. In the winter they'll be quite dry and a different set of plants will flourish. So it's really rather nice, and this dune slack, I say, has come on leaps and bounds in recent years. In the last 20 years maybe, you can see that there's black bog rush all around the outside, Schoenoplectus nigricans. That used to be really rare, and it now covers 200 or 300 square meters of this wet slack. Okay, so we're going to park. We're going to cross over the causeway. We're going to park up, and we're going to look at the plants which are found in these dune slacks and dunes. Now, I should warn you that this film was made earlier on this year by my film company, Garland Films, for the Natural History Society of Northumbria. And you'll see it was made in 2 bits, but it's quite a nice guide of plants on on Holy Island. It's for a general audience. Some of you will recognise many of these plants. Some of you will recognise all of them, of course, but 1 or 2 might be a little less usual. So here we go. Hello. I'm Chris Metherell, and the Natural History Society of Northumbria have asked me if I would make some films about wildflowers in Northumberland. And as a special treat today, we've come to Holy Island, as you can probably see. We're just driving onto the island now. If you come to Holy Island, do make sure that you check the tide tables first. You don't want to get stuck on the island, and you certainly don't want to get stuck in the sea. But we're okay today, so we're going to drive onto the island, which has all sorts of really fascinating plants. Natural History Society used to organise trips to Holy Island in the 19th century, and certainly this last century, and it's a place well worth visiting. So we're going to park up on the Snook, which is the western end of the island, and then we'll go into the dunes and see what we can find. I'm sure there will be some orchids, some other really special plants to see. Well, we're going to start off by looking at an orchid. This is one of our commonest orchids in the northeast, and it's quite widespread. It's particularly widespread on Holy Island. We have lots of it here. This is Northern Marsh orchid, Dactylorhiza purpurella. Purpurella is a pretty good name for it because it's deep purple. And orchids can be tricksy to tell one from the other. They do hybridise, and that makes them rather awkward. But this one is quite obvious. If you look at the bottom lip of the flowers, called the labellum, you'll see that it's diamond shaped almost. It's rhombic. It's this deep purple colour, and the flowers are quite small. The leaves are unspotted, occasionally in the northeast, I have to tell you, they do sometimes have spots, which is rather awkward of them. But this one's a nice unspotted example. So this is northern marsh orchid. It doesn't necessarily grow in marshes, but it does like damp places. And undoubtedly, it's been rather dry on Holy Island recently, but undoubtedly there is water. If I push my fingers into the turf, it's going to be quite damp down there. So this is our commonest marsh orchid in the northeast, our commonest orchid, northern marsh orchid, Dactylorhiza purpurella. Well, I'm now lying next to one of Holy Island's special plants. This is purple milk vetch, Astragalus danicus, and it's an endangered plant in the UK. I'm pleased to say that our Northumberland populations are holding up pretty well, and it's not common on Holy Island, but it's quite widespread. And I'm looking at a patch which is just outside Snoop Tower. There's a well-known place to come and see it. It's a lovely little purple flower. It's a pea flower, so it has the standard pea flower shape of standard at the back and two lateral petals and two keels at the bottom. They're very small, purple, stick up almost vertically, and it has very divided leaves, pinnate leaves, and they're absolutely tiny. The leaves are only, I suppose, 1.5 centimetres long, and the leaflet's probably 5 millimetres. It's called purple milk vetch because it was believed that if you fed it to goats, they would produce more milk. I don't think anybody's ever tried that on Holy Island, but maybe they have. But don't try it now because it's an endangered plant, and we really want to keep as much of it as we can. But it's a lovely plant, beautiful purple flowers shining out of the short turf. It's unmissable when you fall over it on Holy Island and in other places too. Purple milk vetch, Astragalus danicus. Well, here I am, sitting in the middle of this fantastic array of plants. Aren't these magnificent? This is Viper's bugloss, Echium vulgare in Latin. And as you can see, they're the most fantastic electric blue spires, and they're really quite common on Holy Island. And this year, they're doing really, really well, as you can see. And this is not just the only patch on Holy Island. I can see another one over there, and another one over there. They're magnificent. And they say they have this electric blue colour, and if you look at them closely, you can see that the stamens are a rather deep shade of pinky red. And that just sets them off, I think. It just contrasts so well with the blue. They're related to forget-me-nots. It's the borage family, related to borage, but I don't suggest you put this in your pins. And you need to be a little bit careful because some people are slightly allergic to the hairiness of the plants. They are quite rough, hairy, but they're the most beautiful things. You could grow these in your garden, couldn't you? They're much better than foxgloves any day. Viper's bugloss, Echium vulgare. Well, here I am, lying down on the job again, but in this case, it's so that I can show you this plant, which is called butterwort, Pinguicula vulgaris in Latin. And it's a very recognisable plant. As you can see, it has these absolutely lime green leaves, and it's just stick out from the rest of the grass and the surrounding herbage. You can see them very easily indeed, even when they're not flowering. The flowers themselves are rather pretty. They're in a family all of their own, but these deep purple flowers, sometimes only one stem in the middle of a rosette, but these are doing really well, and I can see one over there that's got 7 or even 8 flowering stems growing out of the centre. And these are carnivorous. No, they don't eat fingers, they only eat flies. And what they do is they have a sticky substance on the surface of the leaf which attracts small insects, thrips and things like that. And when the leaf rolls up, the insect gets digested, it unrolls, and the exoskeleton, which the fly can't digest, just blows away. And the reason they do that is because they live in waterlogged places. It's very damp here underneath the dune slack, and waterlogged soils lack nitrates. And so these plants have to replace their nitrates in some other way, and they do that by catching insects and getting their nitrates through their carnivorous activities. So this is butterwort, Pinguicula vulgaris. So this is early marsh orchid. We've seen Dactylorhiza purpurella, the northern marsh orchid. This is Dactylorhiza incarnata. And the typical form, as you can see, is a light pink colour. It's often described as dead men's flesh, which actually is a very apt description, which is quite pinky. They can be difficult to tell from northern marsh orchid, so I thought it would be useful to go through the details. Northern marsh orchid, the leaves are usually unspotted. Sometimes in the north they can have spots on, but early marsh orchid is always unspotted, and the leaves are hooded. If I touch them at the ends, there's a distinct hood at the end of the leaf, much more hooded than the northern marsh. But what really separates them is if you look at the flowers. And if you look at the bottom lip of each flower, you can see that on this plant, the early marsh orchid, the sides of the lip are swept back like wings, whereas in the northern marsh orchid, they're flat. And so if you look at this from the front, each flower looks really narrow. It's not, because the sides are swept back, but that's the way it looks. They come in three colours. Well, actually, they come in more than three colours, but on Northumberland, they come in three colours. This dead men's flesh colour, there's a brick red one, and they also come in the same sort of purple that you get for northern marsh. They're supposed to be subspecies, but they seem to grow together on Holy Island, so, well, the taxonomists say they're subspecies at the moment, so we'll stick with that. But this is early marsh orchid. Flowers, despite its name, just about at the same time as northern marsh, maybe a little earlier in the northeast. Dactylorhiza incarnata. Right, well, I'm standing next to a rather nasty plant now. All plants are lovely, but some plants are lovelier than others, and this one, I'm afraid, comes pretty close to the bottom of the list, not on loveliness, but on irritation. This is Pirri-Pirri-bur. It's from New Zealand. Its Latin name is Acanea neozelandii, and that tells you that it's an alien. We think it probably came in through bull shoddy on the Tweed Valley, but it's ended up on Holy Island, and it's absolutely everywhere on the island, and it's a really nasty, invasive thug. It's really difficult to get rid of, and what's worse is it's really difficult to get rid of off your boots and your trousers, because although when it's flowering, it's reasonably pretty, small white globular heads of flowers, not too bad, but when it's seeding, it has really quite sharp spines, but spines which will stick on your clothes. Each seed has 3 of them, and if you get it on your boots and your trousers, it's really difficult to get off. In the late summer, you see dogs on Holy Island, and they're covered with burrs from Pirri-Pirri-bur. It must be so uncomfortable, and because it gets on people, it's gone all over Northumberland. It's on the top of Cheviot. It's every tourist spot practically, because 1 million people came to Holy Island last year, and you feel like most of them must have got Pirri-Pirri-bur on their boots. So it's a very common plant on the island, so I really need to show you. But do be careful with it. When you come off the island, if you're here in August or late July or September, you will get this on your feet, and if it gets into your garden, you'll never get rid of it. It's a real invasive thug. Pirri-Pirri-bur, Acanea neozelandii. And if we look at the pods, you can see that the bill part of the pod is much longer than the ones we saw earlier on. Something strange has happened here. I'm just going to pause this. Something has gone wrong. Cheviots, it's every tourist spot practically, because 1 million people came to Holy Island last year, and you feel like most of them must have got Pirri-Pirri-bur on their boots. So it's a very common plant on the island, so it's invasive thug. Pirri-Pirri-bur, Acanea neozelandii. Is a rose. Right. And it's the typical rose of sand dunes, which is burnet rose, Rosa spinosissima. Latin, which is a jolly good name for it, because it's covered in short, very sharp spines, and an awful lot of them. It's very spiny, spinosissima. Roses have a reputation for being difficult to identify, I mean. And it's not my favourite set of plants. I find them difficult too. I'm told they grow on you, but I haven't really got a grip on quite a lot of them because they hybridise. But this one, on the whole, doesn't. And it's a very pretty rose. And it's typical of sand dunes. You see this white, beautiful white, large flowers sitting up amongst the marram grass. And this, of course, is marram, which is the standard grass of sand dunes. Very, very tough grass. The leaves look as though they're cylindrical. In fact, they're wrapped around their flat, but they're curled round so tightly that it's very difficult to see that they're not a complete cylinder. You can open them with your fingernail and be sure that they are actually flat. But we're not going to talk too much about grass. I much prefer to look at the burnet rose. It's much prettier. Now, the plant I've got in my hand now, one I picked earlier, is thrift. A common sand dune plant, not just on sand dunes. You get it on rocks really close to the sea. It doesn't even mind getting its feet wet in the sea if the tide comes up. And it's a beautiful little plant. You might grow it on your rockery. You grow it on ours. It's quite happy inland on rockeries. But really, this is one of those plants where you absolutely need a hand lens to bring it to life. If you look at it from a distance, flowers, light lilac colour, and they look papery. But you need to get your hand lens out to see why that is. And if I look at the flower head, I can see that it's made up of this one, probably 10 flowers. And underneath that bunch of 10 flowers are 5 very papery structures. They've got a slightly darker line in the centre. So that makes a bowl in which all those little flowers sit. And each individual flower has also got a rather papery, translucent structure attached to the base of each one. And then the flowers themselves are also very papery petals. So the whole thing looks as though it's a piece of origami rather than a plant. They really are very beautiful when you look at them on your hand lens. So this is thrift, Armeria maritima. Now I'm standing next to a patch of scurvy grass. What a very nice name. And that's many English names. Although it's very good for scurvy, it's not a grass. It's a member of the cabbage family. We've seen quite a few members of the cabbage family. And this one has small white flowers, just like the rest of them. 4 white petals on a cross. And in the UK, this one is found, really it's a salt marsh plant. I'm standing on the edge of the sand dunes here, next to a salt marsh, which is just over there. And so this is on the margin between the two. And it's called scurvy grass because it's full of vitamin C. And if you are prone to scurvy or going on a long voyage and you've run out of lemons and oranges, you could eat scurvy grass and it would stop you getting ill. I have to tell you, I don't recommend it. It tastes absolutely disgusting. Give me oranges every day. This is Pirri-Pirri-bur officinalis, common scurvy grass, but you'll almost certainly have seen another one, because if you are driving around almost anywhere on a major road in the UK these days, in the spring, May, you will see rows of light purple, slightly pinky, tiny little flowers on the edges of the motorways and on the central reservations. Those are scurvy grass. It's because we spread so much salt, and these are salt-tolerant plants, that it's allowed the expansion of scurvy grass along our main trunk roads and motorways. That, in fact, is Pirri-Pirri danica, Danish scurvy grass, not our common scurvy grass that we've got next to it here. Well, I'm sitting next to some kidney vetch, Amphilis vulneraria. in Latin, and it grows on sand dunes. It's very common on sand dunes in Northumberland, but it also grows in other places too. It's called kidney vetch because the groups of flowers, and they're clustered together, as you can see, in quite dense heads, are faintly kidney-shaped. It's not a very good name, really. It's traditionally used for curing wounds, and for this vulneraria. Vulneraria means wound, or was derived from the word for wound. As you can see, it's a yellow, lovely little yellow pea flower. It has the calyces, that's the green bits behind the corollas, the flowers, very often are red, and sometimes the whole flower is red. If you go to Anglesey, on the dunes on the west coast of Anglesey, you'll see they're all red. And the seed pods, which being a pea flower, of course, like little pea-shaped pods, are tiny. I mean, they're only 3 millimetres long. It's too early to see those because we were filming this in late May. And it's a very important plant ecologically because it's the only food plant of the small blue butterfly, or the caterpillars of the small blue butterfly. So in order to have small blues, you have to have lots of kidney vetch. And kidney vetch is doing very well this year. It's 2020, and there's loads of it about. So it should be a good year for small blue butterflies, we hope. But next to me is a lovely June specialist plant in Northumberland, and indeed it's our county flower. This is bloody cranesbill. Its Latin name is Geranium sanguineum. Sanguineum means blood, which related to the word means blood. And for those of you who are gardeners, you'll be saying, "Oh, but that's a geranium." Well, it is. Its Latin name is Genesis geranium. You can see it's got very divided leaves, much more divided than the sorts of geranium that we tend to grow in our gardens. And the flowers, it's called bloody cranesbill because of the flower colour, but they're not really blood colour. They're really a deep, dark magenta purple, I think. So it's our county flower of Northumberland, so it's found on dunes all the way up the Northumberland coast. And why is it called a cranesbill? Well, if you take one of the pods, this is just about got its seed pod, and you can see that the pods are shaped like a bird's beak. And in body cranesbill, the beak is quite short, but in some of them it's really long. It can be 2.5, it's almost 3 centimetres long. And it's very much like a cranesbill. There's another group, storksbills. They have the really long pods. So this is bloody cranesbill, Geranium sanguineum. Well, now I'm standing next to silverweed, Potentilla anserina in Latin, and it's a member of the cinquefoil family, which gives away its character. Cinque, sac in French, is 5, and cinquefoils usually have 5 petals, or some which have 4, but most of them have 5 petals, and in most of them, the leaves are also in 5s. They have 5 palmate lobes, like the fingers of a hand. But this one doesn't. It has the 5, in this case, yellow petals, but you can see that the leaves are pinnate, and it's those leaves that give silverweed its English name, because they are covered in long silvery hairs, particularly on the underside. And from a distance, from standing up, those leaves look grey-green, silvery grey-green, sticking out from between the darker green grasses and other plants. And they're very obvious, and of course the flowers are big too. They're large for native cinquefoils, and they stand out. So it's quite an obvious plant. It likes growing on sand dunes, but would also grow in other disturbed habitats, on roadsides, even old industrial sites. It's quite happy to live in, I say, these sites and places which are disturbed. It doesn't mind rude or man-made habitats. But here we are on a sand dune. This is much more of its normal native place. Silverweed, Potentilla anserina. Sometimes on sand dunes, you just have to get down close up and personal with a plant. And This is a small flower plant. It's very pretty. It's called common stalkspill. Now, I mentioned stalkspills earlier on, and so it is related to the bloody cranesbill you saw. This one has much longer seed pods and is in the family of genus called Erodium. Erodium secutarium. And unlike the bloody cranesbill we saw earlier, this one has very finely divided pinnate leaves. And it has the same kind of petals as the bloody geranium, but in this case, they're quite small and they're pink. Often I have to tell you they are very light coloured, almost white, sometimes darker, but they have a very curious characteristic that we've not seen before, and that is that of the 5 petals, 3 are long and 2 are short. And that's very characteristic of this particular plant. So this is common stalkspill, and if we look at the pods, you can see that the bill part of the pod is much longer than the ones we saw earlier on in bloody cranesbill. It's a very common seaside plant. It will grow down on the shingle, but it's very happy up in sand dunes. It never gets much bigger than this, and you'll find it all the way up and down the coast. Common stalkspill, Erodium secutarium. Well, for our last plant, this particular plant. So this is common stalkspill, and if we look at the pods, but it's an example of a type of plant which we haven't seen yet, and that is the composites. This is Mousea hawkweed. We'll pick one because there's lots all about. And you can immediately see that it looks like a dandelion. And you'd be forgiven for thinking I've only got one flower in my hand. But what is clever about these is that each one of these yellow things that look like petals, we call them ligules, is in fact a separate flower. And if I pull them apart a bit, hold them in my hand, I can see that each one has got stamens, it's got anthers, it's got all the usual paraphernalia that a flower has. And so in this one head, I've probably got 50 flowers. And that's one of the reasons these are such successful plants, is because one flowering head can produce sometimes 100 or even 150 different flowers. It's very easy to spot. Dandelions, yellow dandelion-like plants are notoriously difficult to tell one from the other. This is very easy because if you look at the leaves, you can see that it's got long white hairs on the leaves. And it's really our only yellow composite that does that. It's called Mousea hawkweed. Mousea is rather a common name for English name for plants. And its Latin name is Pilosella officinarum. And officinarum means it's an apothecary's plant. The original office was the apothecary's shop. And so as soon as you hear the name officinarum, you know it must be good for something. And this has appeared in herbals since the 16th century as a remedy for coughs. I haven't tried it. I don't know whether it works or not. I suspect it doesn't. But Pilosella officinarum, this is our first composite. Well, I hope you've enjoyed Holy Island. We'll probably come back in a couple of weeks' time, maybe a month's time, and we'll see some more orchids because there are going to be different ones coming out over the next few weeks. So I suspect we'll be back. But for the moment, from Holy Island, I hope you've enjoyed it. Right. Okay. Well, so that was filmed by my wife Hazel, who did all the camera work and stuff. She's got a much steadier hand than I have, obviously. Now, let me see if I can see for any. There are no questions. Oh, that's great. Fantastic. I love it.
Go on, I'll have to give people a moment's thought, Chris.
Okay, yes. I should say that I only used a couple of orchids there, and I mentioned more orchids at the end of the film. If you want to see more orchids, then there's another chat. I think, is it in April, Janet? I can't remember.
Probably. I think it is. I think it is. Hang on, 2 secs.
Well, just while you're checking that, no, it's not a hoopoo feather. It'd be nice if it was a hoopoo feather.
Yeah, April. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, April.
Yeah, the feather came with the hat, and I've no idea what it is. I have a number of hats. Those who are familiar with my botanical trips will know. That's the clean hat. When I go to the Farne Islands to film or to monitor, I have a dirty hat which is covered with tern poo, because the terns just love dive bombing you. So do the gulls, but I tend to avoid them. What month was it filmed? It was filmed in June. I think it was filmed in 2 parts. I have a feeling the second part was 18th of June and the first part was maybe 10 days earlier. You will have noticed that my shirt changed.
Yeah.
I blame continuity is terrible, you know.
I think we did a wildflower meeting to Holy Island, but I think it was later in the year. I
did one a few years ago, and I know some people who are here today were on that, and it was absolutely terrible. It was the hottest summer it's been in Northumberland for about 30 years, and everything was just completely fried to a frazzle. There was hardly, everybody was very polite about it, but there was nothing to see really. It was awful.
No, it wasn't that year we went, Chris. I think it was the midsummer and it was raining.
Oh, well, it does that in Northumberland.
Okay.
I've got one here. Are efforts underway to try and control Pirri-Pirri-bur, or is it just too out of control to make it worth the bother? No, there are lots of attempts going on. Newcastle University have got a postdoc, 2 postdocs I think, working on spraying the plants with liquid nitrogen. Well, there you go. I wouldn't fancy it myself much, but the trouble with Pirri-Pirri-bur is it has a very long rootstock, and so you can't pull them up because inevitably it snaps like a dandelion. You leave a bit, and then in 2 or 3 years you've got it again. But apparently they think that if you squirt liquid nitrogen into the center of the rosette, it will kill it. Well, we'll see. Hope so, because it's an absolute menace. I mean, it's awful plant, and it grows. You might have seen it on some of the shots in the background. It just grows mixed in with really exciting plants, gentians and orchids and all sorts of things. So, if you tried killing it with Roundup or something, you'd just kill the whole environment. It'd be awful. So yes, people are trying to find ways of dealing with it. Holy grass doesn't grow on Holy Island, I'm afraid. It does grow in one location in Northumberland, on the River Tyne. I've only ever seen it on the Orkneys. I don't know much about holy grass. I've seen it once. That was enough. I believe they use it to flavour vodka. You can buy it, go to Tesco's and you see a bottle, and sometimes I can't remember the name of the make, and they have it, so got a bit of grass in it. That's holy grass apparently. I don't know whether it makes the vodka taste nice or not. I fancy it myself. Yes, dead men's flesh. I have to tell you, dead men's flesh is dirty grey blue. Yes, that one I showed, that orchid I showed you was a bit pink. I have to say, it's almost dead men's flesh. It's not the normal colour of the nominate subspecies. Is not really a dirty grey blue, but it's nickname. That's its nickname really. How do you tell the difference between June helleborina and the Holy Island helleborina? Well, the answer is you don't. I think the current view, Ian Denham is here somewhere, and he will be able to tell us more, but I think the current view is that they are in fact all the same species. There might be a var or something. Ian, it's Ian there somewhere. Ah, Zubrovka, yes, that's it. That's the vodka. Is Ian there? We got Ian Denham. Can he unmute himself and tell us about Holy Island? I can't see him. No, I can't see him. So the answer is, I think, that the differences are so slight that if you put one next to the other, I certainly wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And I think more particularly between the Holy Island Helleborina and what used to be called the Tyne Valley Helleborina, something like that. We have a group of them which grow along the Tyne Valley, which have been called all sorts of different things. And I think the general view now is, in fact, they're really all June Helleborinas. If you want to know, there's a lovely book which I thoroughly recommend, the Orchid Bible, and this is, I think, is slightly more up to date than Stace, and he deals with the Helleborina issue quite effectively. Let's see. No, I think I've run out. I think that's. Has anybody else got anything exciting?
Has Stephen Gator got anything to say on that one? Or is he just? He's in your area. Oh, he just disappeared off there. I
should say that on Holy Island, of course, the speciality. I mean, Lindisfarne Helleborina is a pretty dull plant. I mean, it's dirty green, scraggly thing. Often doesn't flower very much. It's not exactly a very beautiful plant. But what we do have, say, if you come back in April, we'll deal with it. Are marsh Helleborinas, and they are those fantastic things. I mean, they're like little clowns, and we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them on Holy Island. I mean, it's a much better plant to see than the June. I'm just looking up June Helleborinas. Yes, it's this chap suggests that subspecies Junensis subspecies sancta, and the Tyne one, the one that grows along the Tyne valleys, Junensis var Tynensis. Well, yes, all very suspicious.
If anybody wants to comment, please unmute yourself and share.
Oh, who's the author of the Orchid book? The author of the Orchid book is Sean Cole and Mike Waller. It's one of the wild guides. Where's it? It's back to front, isn't it? Yes, okay. It's Britain's Orchids, a field guide to the orchids of Great Britain and Ireland. Sean Cole and Mike Miller, fantastic botanists, and it's one of this lovely wild guide series, and it's not sponsored, but it's approved by the BSBI. It's got our stamp on it, so we're rather pleased with that. It is actually a fantastic book. I mean, it's a pity Ian, I can't see him. Say about it, but you can't unmute to everybody, it says. It really is a fantastic orchid book. I mean, right up to date. Latest, the Helleborina situation, there was a scientific paper published in 2019, so that's after stage 4, but it's contained in this book, doing the genetics, and if genetics tell you anything, and I speak as a euphrasia referee, where genetics tell you absolutely nothing.
I'm trying to unmute Charles, but I don't seem to be unmuting him.
Lost plants on Holy Island. I take that to mean, are there any plants that have become extinct? Yes, there are. The most famous one is Carex maritima, curved seg, which used to grow. Remember the house with the tower on? I'm going to screen share again. I'll show you where it was. Okay, you should now have the map, and here's the house with the tower here, and here's the road in from a car park. So you parked up here, you've walked past what is now a very wet slack that I showed you, down past the house, waving at the occupants if they're in their garden. And there are these two round-ish slacks here, particularly what round one there. And that's the last known site for Carex maritima. It used to grow about where the hand is. I think it was last seen in 1978. And we keep looking. 1 year, who knows, it'll pop up. It was found on the north of the island, but unfortunately we don't know where, because although I shouldn't speak ill of one's forebears, but my predecessor in title, George Swan, who was the Vice County Recorder for Northumberland, the whole of Northumberland before me, was fantastic botanist. I mean, far better botanist than I shall ever be. And he recorded it on the north end of Lindisfarne and at this site. He recorded it right up on the North Links, but the grid reference, I'm afraid, is in the sea. George's grid references were not, his map reading was not his strong point, shall we say, and it's not been refound. Don't know where it was. It's a bit of a pity. But if you want to go and try and find it, I say park up in the car park, walk past Nuke House, find this nice round slack behind the house, and aim for the hand, and who knows, you might find it. If you do find it, give me a ring quickly. I'd love to see it. Small blues, I believe we do. I don't know much about butterflies, but I believe we do. Not sure. Perhaps. I think we do.
I thought they were butterflies. Charles, if you've got a question, you are unmuted.
Oh, yes, you do, somebody says. Somebody knows about butterflies says, oh, yes, we do get small blues. Excellent. I was pretty sure we would.
They don't show currently in the Millennium Atlas of butterflies, but I know that's 20 years old, of course.
I didn't catch that.
There's no current spot in the Millennium Atlas of butterflies, but that is 20 years old, so they may have come back in the meantime.
You never know. Yeah.
Well, if we've got, I think we've run out of questions here. Oh, hang on.
Well,
Scots lovage.
Now here's a question. This is a very good question. Scots lovage. This is you used to have Scotch lovage. Is it still around? Now, once again, my predecessor found Scotch lovage in several locations along the north coast of the island. So if I'm going to screen share again. Okay, he found it in these areas here, and we ran a week's recording trip to Holy Island in about 2009, 2010. We have run subsequent ones, but this was the first one we ran, and we set somebody off with his sandwiches and his thermos flask. And he started here and he walked all the way along every inch of the north coast. And this was in, say, about 2009, 2010, and couldn't find a single plant. Mike Braithwaite, he was the then president of the BSBI, so he was pretty good at finding Scotch lovage. He knew what he was looking for, and he couldn't find it. And but last year, so we assumed it had gone. It doesn't do very well in Northumberland. It's right on the edge. It does grow a little bit further south from Holy Island, and a little bit further north. So it ought to theoretically still there. But this year, last year, one of the members, one of the employees of a Natural History Society, who's not a botanist, was out, and he parked up in the car park, and he walked down this path here, and somewhere here he found Scots lovage. And I know it's right because he took a photograph of it and he sent me the photograph. What he didn't do was record the accurate grid reference. So we know it's somewhere here. I've been to look, I couldn't find it. It was locked down last year, and I couldn't get this winkle this guy out of his house in Gateshead to get him to take me to where he found it. But sooner or later, so I'm sure it's there. I mean, I've seen a photograph of it. I'm sure it does grow along here. There have been reports of it in other places, but it's always turned out to be something else rather than Scots lovage. But I'm sure it's still there. Not quite sure where.
Well, the problem with this, Chris, is that really, you know, it's very nice to have. Thank you very much. There's a lot of effort gone in. And thanks very much. It's been really good. But I want to go there again. I want to be there, and I think that if that's coming through on the chat line as well, it's sort of reminding people, and you know,
well, yeah,
we know what we're missing.
Yeah, well, we'll organise one. I mean, I've got another question. Seaside Sanctuary. Yes, we get lots of Seaside Sanctuary. It's quite common on the Snook and one or two other places. And there have been suggestions that we have a hybrid as well between Seaside Sanctuary and Common Sanctuary. I've not yet found it. I think it's probably ephemeral. You know, pop up one year and it may disappear. But it will be interesting to keep on looking for it. I mean, I do in a sort of rather desultory way. But yes, we do have Seaside Sanctuary. One of my favourite plants. It's for a small plant. It's right in your face. You know, it's got that fantastic cerise, deep cerise colour, and it's really quite a small plant. But I think it really punches above its weight. I think it's a great plant.
You want to do that?
Okay. Yes. Good. Yeah, we'll organise a real one.
Yeah, I know.
And you've all got to come. All right?
All 89.
All there.
Yeah, that's one advantage of this. Anyway, thanks very much, Chris, for you know, leading us on this initiative. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for participating, attending. I mean, I made the decision that we wouldn't leave everybody able to talk because there's, you know, this many people. It's quite difficult. Might not hear anything else if we did that. But you know, we could refine things later if people give me feedback on, you know, how they found it, and you know, if they enjoyed or whatever they thought. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you ever so much, Chris, for doing. Cheers. I haven't got my drink. Sorry. Cheers. And thank you, everybody, and goodbye. Thank you.